The moment Chase Dunmore grabbed the open microphone from the event coordinator's hand and pointed across the ballroom at me, I felt the air go out of my lungs, the same way it had 10 years ago in the student union, fast and without warning. "Hold on, everybody, hold on." He tapped the mic twice with 2 fingers, flashing the grin I used to confuse with confidence. "Before we get to the awards portion of the evening, I just want to take a second to acknowledge one of our classmates." He pointed. "Serena! Serena, where are you?" There she is. 200 heads turned in my direction. Serena walked away from her position at Meridian Consulting. Top 15 firm, corner office basically guaranteed to make bread. He let the word breathe. Bread. I'm completely serious. Took out a small business loan, rented a 400-square-foot storefront in Noda, and spent 3 years perfecting sourdoughs. He started slow clapping, his expression arranged into something that was meant to look like admiration, but was built entirely out of contempt. "So let's hear it for following your passion, everyone." The laughter came in, scattered, and became a wave. Easy, comfortable, the kind that moves through a room when nobody in it is the one being laughed at. I was holding a glass of sparkling water. I don't drink much anymore, not with 4:30 mornings, and I smiled. A small, quiet smile that I'd spent the better part of a decade learning to use. It communicated exactly nothing. That was the point. "My name is Serena Ashworth. I'm 32 years old. If you had found me at 22, standing outside Jefferson Hall with a half-eaten dining hall sandwich and a communications scholarship I spent 4 years being quietly terrified I didn't deserve, I would not have predicted any of what my life became. Not the good parts. Not the nights when the lone felt like standing water I was trying to breathe through. And certainly not this ballroom, or what was about to happen in it. Chase and I dated for almost 2 years. He was in the business school. I was in communications. For a while, we fit the way people fit when they're young enough to confuse chemistry with compatibility through proximity and shared playlists, and the particular loneliness of being a new adult in a new city with nobody yet who really knew you. He was ambitious in the loud way. He talked about his 5-year plan with the same energy most people use to announce a death in the family. Urgent. Insistent. Like you'd better absorb it now or miss something important. He networked before networking was something you said you did. He interned at firms in Charlotte, then Atlanta, then New York, flying back for the weekends and telling me about it with the satisfied exhaustion of someone who wanted to be envied. I was quieter about what I wanted. I liked to cook. I liked kitchens at 5 in the morning, the specific silence of them, flour on the counter and something rising in the oven, and nobody asking me anything yet. I found a recipe for brioche in a used cookbook. I paid $2 for at a thrift store on Sharon Amity Road. And I spent 3 weekends that semester trying to get the crumb right, and that was a kind of happiness that didn't need to be explained to anyone. It also didn't make sense to Chase in any language he spoke. He ended things junior year at a table in the student union in front of 4 of our mutual friends, announcing that he needed someone more aligned with his ambitions and that he'd always worried about me. That I played it safe, that I was smart, but he didn't think I'd ever actually build anything real with it. I didn't cry until I was in the elevator going back to my dorm. In front of him, I picked up my backpack and left. I was so careful not to let him see a single thing. For years, I carried those words the way you carry something you borrowed and forgot to return. Playing it safe. Never build anything real. I went to graduate school anyway. I took the job at Meridian anyway. I wore the blazers and sat through the Monday morning, all-hands meetings, and tracked metrics on other people's spreadsheets. And the whole time, something quiet and persistent was happening in the margins of my life that I couldn't switch off no matter how many hours I logged. I started baking again. Seriously this time. Early mornings before work. Saturdays at the farmer's market in Dilworth. A sourdough that took 14 attempts to write. A croissant laminate that took considerably more. A friend told me I should start selling. My mother asked if I was sure. My father, who had spent 30 years on the floor of a manufacturing plant in Gastonia and had what I would call calibrated opinions about financial risk, went very quiet on the phone when I told him what I was thinking. 3 years after I started at Meridian, I gave 2 weeks' notice. I will not pretend it was clean or easy, or that I trusted myself the entire way through. There were nights in the first year when I sat at the small desk in my apartment, in front of a spreadsheet that did not look the way I needed it to look. The loan payments, the lease, payroll, for 2 part-time employees who were counting on me, and I could hear Chase's voice in the space behind my own thinking. Playing it safe wasn't my problem anymore. The opposite of it was. But I kept going. I named the shop proof, a baking term, for the final rise before the oven. I thought it was the right word for a lot of reasons. By the end of year 1, there was a line out the door most Saturday mornings that wrapped around the side of the building. By year 2, I had signed with Harris Teeter for a wholesale account that placed our packaged sourdough in 46 stores across the Carolinas. By year 4, we had opened a second location in South End and a third in Ballantyne. By the time the reunion invitation landed in my inbox, a cheerful email with our school's crest on it, a save the date, a note about how much had changed, Proof had 8 locations, 47 employees, and a distribution agreement with Whole Foods that had taken 14 months to negotiate, and still made me stop and breathe sometimes when I looked at the quarterly numbers. My instinct was to delete the email. I sat at the kitchen counter with my laptop and let the cursor hover over it for a full minute. What exactly would I be walking into? What was I trying to prove, and who was I proving it to? I'd asked myself those questions before, and always talked myself out of going anywhere near the answers. Then my husband walked up behind me, read the screen over my shoulder, and said, "You should go." He knows me well enough not to say it twice. He just set it down once, walked over to check on our son, and let me make my own decision. I went. The reunion was held at the Ballantyne Hotel, a venue I knew well. Proof had catered 2 of their corporate holiday events the previous year. I handed the keys to the valet, straightened my dress into reflection of the revolving door, and walked inside. The ballroom was done up in navy and gold, our school colors, with photo montages cycling on screens at either end. Cocktail tables in white linen. A jazz trio working through something low and warm in the far corner. Every person in the room was dressed as though they'd spent a week deciding what to wear, which I understood because I had too. I'd gone with a simple black dress. Nothing that announced anything. My wedding ring and small diamond studs, no other jewelry. I had debated more. The statement earrings, the heels that made a sound, and then I'd put everything back. I didn't need the armor, I'd told myself, and I'd almost believed it. The first 40 minutes were genuinely fine. I found Priya from my sophomore dorm, who was now a pediatric nurse in Raleigh, and a guy named Fletcher from my senior media writing seminar who'd landed somewhere unexpected, running a documentary production company out of Asheville, of all places. We stood near the bar and talked in the easy way you can, with people you never really lost touch with, only drifted from slightly. I was in the middle of telling Priya about the Whole Foods negotiation, when I felt the air pressure in the room change the particular way it does when someone is walking toward you with a purpose they've already decided on. Serena. Chase Dunmore had added about 15 pounds and approximately $10,000 worth of suit since the last time I'd seen him. His hair was shorter, precision cut to look effortless in the way that costs real money. He was holding a glass of whiskey, neat, which I noticed was a choice made specifically to be noticed. "You actually showed up," he said, scanning me the way you look at something you're trying to assess for value. "I was invited," I said, "same as you." He laughed as if I'd been charming. "I heard you were still doing the bakery thing," he said. "Bakery thing, the way you'd say that phase. How's all that going for you?" "Really well," I said. "Simple, true." Good, good." He swirled his glass. I'm at Forrest and Webb now, VP of Client Strategy. We just closed a Q3 book that was up 40% over last year. It's been a significant run. He was talking at me, not to me, broadcasting for a listener he'd imagined in advance. I've got a team of 14 under me now. It's a lot to manage, but honestly, I thrive in that environment. Always have. He looked at me sideways. Are you still out in Noda? I drove past that little spot once. Cute place. We're in 8 locations now, I said. Plus wholesale. His smile redistributed itself. 8 locations, he said slowly, for a bakery. For proof, yes. He nodded the way people nod when they've confirmed something they were already certain of. Well, he raised his glass, living the dream. And then the event coordinator made the mistake of stepping away from the open microphone. I've already told you what he said. The bread joke. The slow clap. The laughter that moved through the room in a warm current with me at its center. What I haven't described is what came after the applause faded. He kept the microphone. He stepped down from the podium and walked toward me with it, easy and unhurried, working the room with his eyes the way he always did. Everyone was watching. Reunions do that to people. They're bored and performing, and a spectacle is a spectacle. In all seriousness, he said, and his voice dropped into something textured with false generosity, I have genuine respect for people who take risks, even when those risks don't quite pan out the way you hoped. He looked directly at me. Some people are meant for the corner office, and some people are meant for other things, smaller things. And there's no shame, honestly, in knowing which category you fall into. Self-awareness is its own kind of success. He tilted his head. Right, Serena? The room was so quiet I could hear the ice shifting in someone's glass. I opened my mouth. I'm not sure what I would have said. Probably something too small for the moment. When the service entrance on the far side of the ballroom swung open hard, a small figure came through it at full speed. He was 4 years old, in khaki pants and a blue button-down that had been comprehensively untucked since whatever point in the evening it had been tucked. His dark hair was the same slightly unruly wave his father's used to be. He had a juice box in one hand and a crumpled cocktail napkin in the other. And he was running across the parquet floor toward me with the absolute, uncomplicated confidence of a person who has never once doubted his welcome anywhere. Mommy! He reached me and wrapped both arms around my waist, nearly taking the water glass with him. I caught both, him and the glass, and crouched down on instinct, and he said directly into my ear at full volume. Daddy says the babysitter couldn't come, so we both came, and also, I spilled my juice a little bit on the seat, but Daddy says it's okay. The laugh that came out of me was involuntary. It was the laugh of someone who has been holding a specific, difficult kind of stillness for the past 25 minutes, and then gets suddenly and completely freed from it. Pure and genuine, without any of the calculation I'd been carrying all evening. Around us, the room softened. You cannot hold a brittle social atmosphere next to a 4-year-old running at full speed across a hotel ballroom. It's physically impossible. People were smiling at him, the involuntary kind. The cruelty of the moment dissolved into something it couldn't survive. Chase still had the microphone, but he wasn't talking. I stood up and took my son's hand, and I turned toward the main entrance. The tall paneled doors, the ones that led in from the lobby corridor, came open. Reed walked in. He was in a charcoal suit. No tie. Jacket cut close. The kind of thing that doesn't work to announce anything, because it doesn't have to. He wasn't looking at the crowd or at the chandeliers or at the photo montages, cycling on the screens. He was looking for me, and when his eyes found me, they settled. And something in his expression came loose the way it does when he walks through our front door at the end of a long day and sees me at the kitchen counter. He walked toward us with his hands in his jacket pockets, unhurried. The crowd shifted without deciding to. It just happened, the way it always happens around Reed. People stepping back in their own time, without quite understanding why. I watched Chase Dunmore go still. His jaw didn't drop. He's too practiced for that. But the color left his face in a sequence I could almost map, a slow systemic draining. The whiskey glass stopped halfway to his mouth. His shoulders changed. All the performance went out of them at once. "Mr. Ashworth," Chase said. His voice had changed entirely. The broadcaster's register, the VP cadence, the man who thrives in high-pressure environments' vocal texture. All of it was gone. What remained was something faster and thinner, stripped down to its actual material. Reed stopped a few feet away. He glanced once at Chase, precisely, without theater, and then he looked at me. "Sorry I'm late," he said. He bent down and picked up our son, who immediately launched into the juice situation in comprehensive detail. Reed listened to all of it with full attention and then kissed the top of his head and looked back at me and said, "You okay?" I said yes. I meant it more than I'd meant anything all night. "Mr. Ashworth." Chase had found enough of himself to take a step toward us. I had no idea. Serena and I go way back. We were at school together. We were catching up, reconnecting. He smiled and I watched him work to make it look natural. Small world. Reed turned and looked at him. People always expect cold from Reed. The Wall Street version of authority. All controlled distance and deliberate frost. He's not like that. He's just fully, completely present in a way that most people manage only in pieces. And when that presence turns on you and it isn't warm, you feel the shift. The way you feel a change in barometric pressure. Your body knows before your brain does. "I came in right at the bread joke," Reed said. "That was." Chase laughed too fast. "That was reunion humor, roast style. We all do it with each other. It's just how our group." "Forrest and Webb," Reed said. Not a question. Chase straightened. Something lit up behind his eyes automatically, the way a door opening in the dark lights up whatever's behind it. "Yes. Yes, sir. Strong year for us. I'd actually been hoping to get time on your calendar. At some point, we've been building out a new client services model, and I think there's a real—" "I know your numbers," Reed said. "We've been doing due diligence on your firm for a potential acquisition. 6 weeks." He turned the fountain pen he always carries in one hand, a slow rotation between his fingers. "I made a decision about the deal this morning." The jazz trio was clearly audible. The ice in someone's glass. Someone's heel on the parquet floor, shifting weight. "One of the things I require," Reed said, "from every firm we acquire, every partnership we take on, every company we put Ashworth Ventures behind, is character. Not the kind people perform in pitch meetings. The kind that shows up when a person thinks the outcome isn't connected to who's watching." He looked at Chase for a moment, even and unhurried. "I walked in about 4 minutes ago." Chase's mouth opened. Nothing came. "The deal is off," Reed said. "Legal will send formal notice Monday morning." Chase stood there. I watched the last version of his evening collapse behind his eyes, the carefully assembled image of himself. The VP, the 40% Q3, the man who had thrived, going flat and quiet like something powered down. He looked at me. I don't know what he was searching for. Some angle, some appeal, some door I was holding open from the past that he could slip through. I didn't have one. I'd spent years composing conversations with him in my head. Good ones, clean ones, with the right words in the right order, where I finally said everything I hadn't been able to say in that student union elevator. I had imagined so many versions of this moment, running into him, having the numbers on my side, watching him understand what he'd been wrong about. None of those imagined versions looked like this. None of them had my son climbing back down, out of Reed's arms to tug at my hand, because he'd spotted the dessert display across the room and had opinions about the chocolate fountain. I looked at my husband. That was all. I just looked at him, and he raised his eyebrows slightly in the way that means whatever you need. What I needed was to leave. "We're going to go," I said. Not to the room, not to Chase, just out loud as a statement about what was happening next. Not a negotiation, not an announcement, just the truth of the next 60 seconds. Reed put his hand at the small of my back. My son seized my thumb with his whole fist, walking fast toward the door already, having moved on entirely. We crossed the ballroom. I didn't look behind me, not once. The lobby was cooler and quieter, and smelled like the cedar diffusers the hotel used near the front desk. My son asked immediately whether hotels have pools and whether this specific pool was still open even though it was night, and Reed told him we would check in the tone of voice he uses when the answer is probably yes, but he doesn't want to say it yet, because that information would make bedtime a theoretical concept rather than a practical one. We stopped at the fountain in the center of the lobby, one of those tall modern ones, a single column of lit water, and my son pulled Reed over to it with both hands and began listing every possible wish he could make with the penny Reed found in his jacket pocket. He was deeply concerned that wishing for more wishes was cheating. Reed told him it was. He wanted a second opinion. He looked at me. I crouched down to his level. His hair was doing the thing it does when he's been running, a little damp at the temples, face flushed and entirely uncomplicated in the way that children are when they're happy and don't know they're being watched. "Did you make a wish?" he asked me, very seriously. "I don't think I need to tonight," I said. He thought about this. "You can wish for something easy," he offered, trying to be helpful. "Like a snack, or a really good parking spot." Reed made a sound behind me that was definitively not a laugh, and also completely was. "You know what," I said. "I'll save mine for next time." He accepted this, dropped his penny in the fountain, closed his eyes for a very deliberate 4 seconds, in which he was clearly wishing for something enormous, and then opened them, looking satisfied. We walked out through the front entrance, the automatic doors sliding open into the October night. The air was cool and carried the faint smell of leaves and car exhaust and the particular clean sharpness of a Carolina autumn. My son had already moved on to the question of what happens to pennies at the bottom of hotel fountains, and whether fish could theoretically live there. Reed was explaining the logistics of this with patience and a completely straight face. I didn't feel the need to debrief what had happened in the ballroom. I didn't feel the need to explain it, or revisit it, or position it into a narrative about winning, because it wasn't about any of that. Chase Dunmore's words, the ones from 10 years ago in the student union, and the ones from 40 minutes ago on that microphone, had never been about me. They'd been about what he could see, which was always only as far as his own frame of reference extended. He'd looked at a woman with flour on her hands and a 400-square-foot lease and seen a limitation. That was a failure of imagination, his, not mine. I had built something. 8 locations and 47 people who showed up every morning because of a decision I made, scared and kept making anyway, and a wholesale shelf in the baked goods aisle at Whole Foods, and a 4-year-old who thought hotel pools should be open at any hour, and who reached for my hand in crowded rooms without looking first, because he already knew I'd be there. I had built exactly what I set out to build, and I had done it without ever needing Chase Dunmore to understand it, or approve it, or look me in the eye from across a ballroom, and finally admit he'd been wrong. Standing in the parking lot, watching Reed try to explain fountain infrastructure to a child who was now extremely concerned about the welfare of hypothetical fountain fish, I felt the last of it go. The 10-year weight of those 2 sentences. Playing it safe. Never build anything real. I didn't need revenge. I'd never actually needed it. What I'd needed was to know, not just believe, but know, that the voice in my head wasn't the final authority on what I was capable of. I'd had that answer for years. Tonight, I just finally let myself keep it.